Welcome to 1,000 Words, a podcast that paints a picture about an artist's creative process. There's a lens to focus on the unique perspective of a specific artist, hopefully drawing insight into inspiration as we brush up on how imagination provides a groundwork for artistic exploration. We're excited to continue that journey with our guest today. Today we have Gage Craft. Growing up in a semi-isolationist environment allowed Gage to develop an imaginative fervor. He dove into his own himself and found his own sprawling planes of creation. This has made coping with the developed world into adulthood a struggle, one that he continues to explore in his work, as well as attempting to encapsulate the lessons he gained and world he began conceptualizing as a child through his broken lens, observing the world, but never really feeling a part of it outside of the woods he called home. Now he plans to work for he plans for his work to involve creating a universe that can help to guide youth through esoteric and existential concepts, ones normally faced later in life after living without the need to stop and consider. Philosophical concepts normally deemed to high literature or otherwise for younger peoples to grasp, leaving them unprepared when they have to deal with them. Because these are the things he became drawn towards, horrified by, and understanding of during his time spent feeling as if the, quote, normal world was too far to reach. Gage, thank you so much for coming in today to talking to us a little bit about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, absolutely. You're the one we're speaking to, so you can talk at any point. You're never interrupting me. One thing that I really liked and that captured me about your art is that it's very story-based. Can you tell us a little bit about what you brought in today and kind of give us a little bit of the background of that?
So most of what I brought in today, it is, I do consider myself a storyteller, and I tried to bring in the foundations of that story that I'm attempting to tell. And I have like my book of clown folk here, which is the council that presides over the universe I'm creating and protects it. And then this here are the philosophical ideas, those sort of like weird sort of, I guess, old-timey expressions used just to help grow up sort of thing. And these ones are the ones in particular that I used. And then over here, I have it's an illustration of Roboy and the collector, the antagonist and protagonist of my story. And I did that particular illustration on a piece of parchment paper at a pizzeria. That was the tablecloth, and I was just
okay.
Yeah. So and that's the other side of my artwork too. It's not just dealing with those existential concepts of being alive. It's also what do you have what do you have at your fingertips? What do you have to use to create with? And trying to nurture that creation in the wake of the resources not being available.
Absolutely, yeah. So tell me about the concept, the overall foundation of the story you're telling, the Clown Council as well as the philosophical.
It is just me attempting to interpret the world we're living in, as well as deal with religious sort of trauma. A lot of religious trauma, a lot of trying to find myself through different religious concepts growing up, exploring different religions, different spiritual teachings, practices. And this, the Council of Clowns, each one of them represents a religious sect or spiritual journey sort of lesson. And a lot of the characters that I'm using in my story are adaptations of mythological heroes and gods and figures, monsters, all these sort of things that our entire society has grown up on. And there's this awareness that's building of all of our ideas, all of our heroes, all of our stories lining up and sort of coming from the same source. And this is me trying to find that by building my own.
And then with that religious council of clowns, or that religious trauma that you're talking about, and then focusing it into the Council of Clowns, tell us a little bit about that journey.
Growing up, I went to a church camp out in Ohio when I wasn't in the woods in Indiana, only leaving to go to school and come back and never leave unless I went on a walk somewhere through the woods. I was going to a church camp that was also out in the middle of the woods and isolated and all of this. And our sect of Christianity in particular was Disciples of Christ. And so we had it was an attempt to look more at the true teachings of Christianity while also being very loose with our interpretation, knowing that we didn't have an actual, we as a society don't have a real good way of interpreting what any of these people were saying 2,000 years ago. And that it's been rewritten and redone over and over again by different people in different states of power attempting to influence certain other, all this, King James. And so that religious trauma, and then that part wasn't necessarily traumatic. I'm very grateful that growing up in a Christian household, that was my form of my form of Christianity I got to experience and learn. It was the coming home and away from that sect of Christianity. And the house that we grew up in out in the middle of the woods, across the street, down the road a little bit, was an evangelist church. And they're very fundamental. You're not allowed to take communion if you haven't been baptized in this church in particular by these people that we chose, that all of this sort of thing. You have to, Jesus doesn't accept everybody. You have to accept Jesus and leave your other life behind, sort of thing. And there was a point in time where we had started going to that church for some reason after I had spent 6 years growing up at this one church camp, learning these concepts, and then trying to immerse myself in this now very rigid Christian structure. That was where the trauma came in, was them basically telling me that, no, we're the same, but you're wrong. And it was still sort of, it's one of those, it's like you can never be on the right side of this table, sort of thing, with that sort of Christian outlook. And so it was that experience after my church camp experience, and then attempting to meld the two into each other. I'd come home, I'd go to this church. The summer would come, I'd go to my church camp. I'd come back, I'd tell the church about the church camp, and they'd call me a sinner for going to a different church.
Oh, wow.
It's this sort of thing that led me to, okay, nobody's right. Everybody's got something to say. What are they all saying? And that's where I am now, is containing and writing down all of the things that I've learned instead of just holding on to them up in my head, waiting for them to vanish.
Yeah. And then from that, I mean, what religions have you kind of explored, and how are they represented by the Council of Clowns?
I first practiced Rastafarianism because I thought that'd be a really cool thing to do my senior year of high school. And then I realized that it was a lot more complicated than that. And that was my first step towards realizing that, no, I can't just go read these books and then attempt to intertwine some of these practices. I have to be willing to take the steps to at least practice the religion formally. And so it went from Rastafarianism to okay, let's look at Islam, let's look at Judaism. And I looked at them side by side, and I didn't end up practicing either of those two because those are, Christianity is a branch of either of those two religions. Those are less of religions I felt the need to devote myself to, and more add what they're saying onto the knowledge I've already accumulated growing up in a Christian household, and realizing that the Christian word is a little bit morphed from their word in particular, the Torah being the Old Testament, all of that. But the finding Jesus in the Quran sort of thing, he's still a prophet, he's still honored, but he's not worshipped as a god. He's just another one of the prophets in a lineage going back before history. From there, I dove into, I started looking at what the oldest religions were. You can't practice the Sumerian religion or the Babylonian religion because aside from archaeological artifacts and some writing, we don't really know what those consisted of. I did devote myself to practicing Buddhism and Hinduism for a very short time. It was mostly, I left those behind mostly just because I knew I couldn't hold myself to what the practice required, and I felt I was doing the practice a disjustice.
Oh, okay.
But the oldest religions. Hinduism has a history dating back 4,000 years, longer than that. But then through Buddhism, it connected back to Christianity. Jesus is present in the Buddhist history. And finding that out was, again, filling in that circle, like closing that gap a little bit of, everybody has something to say. It's all the same story we're telling here. But those are the ones that I would say that I practiced and learned the most. They're the main religions. I've researched Shinto. I've very recently delved into the Kabbalah a lot more, which is like old Judaism, mysticism, that sort of thing. And then my family history is where we came from Croatia and Germany and everything. So I've also started to delve more into Balkan paganism, Slavic paganism, that sort of thing. And that's a very fine line too, because you're treading it, and it's like, are you doing this for family history, or are you doing this because you're a white supremacist, sort of thing? These sort that sort of fine line sort of thing, because you can there's so much information missing on Slavic paganism in particular that you can morph the ideologies towards a white supremacist sort of the same thing a lot of people are doing with Norse practices and mythology the past couple of years, where it's become like this very like white nationalism sort of idea. Okay, we're going to practice Norse religion and then, justify our bigotry through that instead. And it's one I've stayed away from, Norse mythology.
Yeah. And then tell me a little bit about the universe you created. Tell me about the protagonist, the antagonist, the council, the philosophical. Let's start with the protagonist and antagonist. Or where do you want to start with your universe? You created it.
Let's talk about clowns a little bit.
Okay.
Another part, another side of religion and spiritualism is the role of the fool. The fool is not just the hero's journey sort of idea that the tarot might sort of lead you to believe, or it is the fool is a hero. He's an anti-villain. He's there not to complete a journey, but to figure out where he's going in the first place. And the fool is the oldest icon in human history. besides like the snake.
What's the difference between a hero and an anti-villain?
A hero is devotedly good. An anti-villain is devoted to justice.
Okay.
At least that's my interpretation. Or their own interests. But that's normally, that I would normally associate somebody entirely invested in their own interests, a villain, regardless of whether they're doing it for good or bad.
Yeah.
There's something bad going on there if it's entirely for their... Anyways.
Yeah.
But then the fool evolved into the clown, and the clown is our... Besides it just being like the circus or, you know, horrifying Pennywise, the clown is supposed to be our innermost self. A lot of people are scared of clowns because it's an exuberant display of one's innermost being, and you know that's what I want to be. Eli there is supposed to be me. He's the leader of the Council of Clowns. There we go. Is Eli here?
Oh, okay.
He's defender of now and warden to then. If I were going to talk about the actual protagonist of the whole series, it's Eli the Speaker. It gets very complicated from here. Eli the Speaker it's before I went to art school, I had wanted to go to school for engineering. And I morphed that into the story where Eli the Speaker is me if I went to school for engineering and became the historian and built robots and ended the world on accident. And Eli found a way outside the universe to view it from above. And from above, he's developed these checkpoints in time that he is able to stop the flow of time when it starts to end and send it back to figure out what happened and do any handiwork that needs done. And he gets that handiwork done through Roboy. Roboy is the manifestation of those checkpoints in time. Roboy started as a doodle that I did at 14 years old in my sketchbooks in high school. And when I got into my second year at Full Sail University, one of my teachers told me that I needed to come up with an idea for a cartoon or some television show. And I decided to brainstorm the heck out of that. And it became Roboy. Roboy is equal parts the hero of time and myself in my exploration of these historical concepts, these religious concepts, and the story itself is supposed to follow that at the end of time, these religious concepts come to a head and they're real and we have to deal with them. And the way we deal with them decides whether we get to continue or not. The entire fate of the universe rests on the glass sea, which is supposed to be the combined energy of every person, place, or thing's ego when it reaches the end and it calcifies, trying to return to the flow of time, and it just builds up. And it's built up so far, it's eating away at time, and that's what Roboy and Eli are trying to stop. Collector, the antagonist. Collector is also a robot. He's a deity. Mm-hmm. And in Roboy, deities are entities that were born or made, robots or organic, with some sort of universal marking. And when they enter the Fountain of Youth, a completely different side of the Roboy story that would take even longer to get into, allows them to become the best form of themselves
Oh, okay.
unless they are held back by a selfish desire or narcissistic desire. And then they become the personification of that narcissistic or selfish desire. Collector's in particular was that he was in love with the earth when he dove into the fountain of youth. So when the fountain of youth began to imbue him with power, he became the personification of that calcification at the end of time, the gathering, the collecting, the coveting of everything around you because he couldn't let go. And the earth is supposed to be Roboy's mom. Again, it's getting real.
No, that's amazing though. I mean, you've built a whole universe, and to build a universe, you start from the ground up, and you have to build the history of it and the future of it. And
eventually, I'll have all of this in book form, and everybody can read it themselves. And I don't have to explain it to everybody over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. So Eli, he found these checkpoints in time.
He created the checkpoints.
He created the checkpoints in time. And so when he's creating those checkpoints, what is he looking for that happened previous to it or post to it? Why is that a checkpoint?
It's the butterfly effect concept. This is something that it was going to happen. It was inevitable that it was going to happen, but it happening sent us to our doom. And so all of the checkpoints are literally just there to continuously push back the butterfly effects over and over and over again. That's essentially what Eli's looking at is, and it's not like a drive it at its source, like go back in time and kill baby Hitler.
Yeah.
It's not that so much as it's like, here is a being or entity with a certain will or belief system. How did they get that will or belief system? Find that or reason with them. Then that's Roboy's job. He's either to hunt down the thing influencing the bad idea, or he's to reason with the people influenced by the bad idea and get to the root of their system. Again, that's where these existential and esoteric concepts come up. Nobody's angry just to be angry. Angry is not an emotion. It's an exaggeration of an underlying problem. It's when you can't escape from something. What are you trying to escape from? That sort of thing.
Interesting. So you're going back to the root cause. A lot of times we're like, we're very answer-based.
Yes.
Yeah, we're very reactive. Eli would be very proactive.
Yes. How did we get here?
Yeah.
And how can we reverse that problem from the get? How can we reverse that problem without, sending something else off into the into the void, or sending another sequence of events out that leads us in straight back where we were in the first place?
And you mentioned anger as one of them. What are some of the checkpoints of I guess, philosophies that went awry or that would lead to the end?
They're mostly the cardinal sins on top of just like, sort of modern concepts we take for granted. There's the greed, sloth, trying to name them all off. The greed, sloth, pride, lust,
Envy.
Yeah. Two more. Wrath. And wrath isn't necessarily anger. Wrath is a feeling of superiority. Like you're unleashing this strength.
That's all right.
You're unleashing this strength because you feel you have a right to it. It's the same, and the cardinal sins all work together in that they can't. One cardinal sin can't exist without another. Greed, sloth, lust, pride, wrath, and then anger, vanity, luxury, trying to think of the rest of it. It's in conformity, temperance, and justice, or prejudice.
Yeah.
Those are like my primary ones. It's a long list of things I'm trying to explain, but if I had to pick out the main concepts I'm attempting to fight, as it would be, it's greed, lust, pride, wrath, sloth, anger, luxury, vanity, and prejudice.
The time we're in right now, as we go from this universe to ours right now that we're living in, how is this kind of a nexus point of being able to explain this so that we can get on the right place and we don't calcify?
And this isn't some sort of egotistical drive. This is, I grew up separating my parents, fighting each other as a 10-year-old kid. So I've always sort of played this role. But nothing challenges democracy and cooperation more than tribalism. And that's across the board. Everybody, like, tribalism's human. Everybody has their tribe. It's when you feel threatened by another tribe, either because your family history dictates that for some reason you need to be threatened by said tribe, or because another tribe is telling you the other tribe is bad.
Hatfields and McCoys kind of situation.
There's no, if there's not a mediator, if there is not a non-bias, it will never work. You'll never come to a conclusion until the other tribe's gone, and it's just the one tribe there to decide to, well, of course we all agree. We're all that's left. And that's, I attempting to be the mediator.
Yeah.
Attempting to be like, hey, like, you guys are experiencing the exact same thing.
Yes.
You're only scared of each other because you're both scared of each other.
Yeah. Because I think as you've explored a lot of the religions, are you seeing a lot of overlapping in key good concepts?
Yeah, they all teach, and that's the strange thing. The strange thing that they're all fighting, because they all teach compassion and acceptance of outsiders. It doesn't make any sense. You're all treat an immigrant as you would your neighbor, but also no. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Every single one of them teaches compassion and understanding and acceptance, and to be that hotel for the outsider.
Yeah.
To be that home for the homeless. And in our modern day, it's become, I'll be a home for the homeless if they have my last name. Like, or my skin color, or, again, that's why I've taken on the role of the mediator with my work, not because I feel impassioned to, but because there's tons of people attempting to, and you need to, we all need to attempt to be mediators within our own tribes at some point.
As an artist who's taken on the role of a mediator, on a larger scale, what role does an artist play in society?
If we were to go all the way back to cave paintings and cave art like that, they're not just, we used to think that they just dictated, like, animals in the area, animals we've hunted, animals we've found, animals in the area. In that sense, it's informational. But there are also a lot of cave paintings that appear to depict stories of animals running along. In that sense, they still are informational. You still know what animals are in the area, what animals we're dealing with, what animals we're eating, what animals are safe to eat. But it's storytelling. It's always storytelling. It's keeping the history of humanity alive. And even further, when you go into the imaginative side of it and creating our own worlds like Middle Earth and the world of Star Wars and stuff like that, it's where we're not... I have a thought. I'm trying to collect it. In creating our own universes, especially in the modern day, where it's almost all we do, is develop these outside universes, attempting to tell our own story, or just tell something that nobody's listening to, so we have to put it in pictures for them to see it. And obviously trying to tell it from our perspective is not working. Here is it from a perspective completely outside. It doesn't exist outside of this person or this group of people's heads. However, it is the exact same lesson. It's the exact same story that somebody's trying to tell, and they've had a hard time getting anybody to listen because it's real.
Mm-hmm. Real has consequences. When you can make a universe, then you're like, okay, that's the other, but it's still telling me a story of something I need to...
something I'm supposed to learn or digest, but I don't have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, for sure.
What was the question?
So what role does an artist play in society?
Attempting to teach an artist... We're all artists. We're all trying to tell our own story. The role an artist plays is conveying the message.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, anyhow, they need to go about it, and especially creating their own world to go about it, because...
Yeah. And then I don't know if it's uniquely human. Those are the only things that I think we've researched enough, or we've seen enough examples of, and we've been able to explain in our own words. But what is an imagination?
It's a loaded question. For me, at least.
Yeah.
My imagination is it's not just my happy place. It's not just a shelter that I go away to when I need some sort of help. It is our brain attempting to manifest all of the information that we are gathering all of the times that we are awake, and attempting to make some sort of sense of it. I've never separated dreams from imagination. They're obviously the same thing. They're coming from the same place. And that might just be because I've spent my entire life in a waking dream, while also, again, dealing with the developed world's really hard when you have an overlay of an entirely different world going on all the time. And so that's why I say it's a loaded question, because for me in particular, I have a hard time separating my imagination from reality sometimes. Not that it's ever negative. My waking hallucinations tend to be positive in comparison to what I've heard. But it's our mind trying to put together the information, and especially nowadays, after we've gone through the pandemic and everything, it's become sort of a trauma response. A trauma response, a boredom response, like, what do you imagine the animals in the cages at the zoos are thinking in their heads, sort of thing? Like, there's, in a cage for so long, you can't go anywhere, you can't see new things. What happens? You build it in your head from what you already know. It's everything you already know.
One of the things that I think is really interesting about the universe that you've created is that you started from the ground up with even its own language. Tell me a little bit about the wordings that you're using, how you're scribing these types of letters, and what they...
This is Shumish. I've always had an obsession with the way that we develop language and linguistics and writing styles, alphabets. Real big history buff growing up. And especially I was into Tolkien. He wrote all of his own languages and everything. So that was my first step going, oh, well, we can make our own languages and words and things. This I made after studying Babylonian, can't think of it right now, but the chisel mark.
Hieroglyphics?
Not hieroglyphics.
Oh,
no. But hieroglyphics as well. I'm sorry, I can't think of the Babylonian one. But then, there's hieroglyphics and then trying to read hieroglyphics. And then what does that mean? Egyptians didn't speak hieroglyphics. That was mostly for what they put on their walls. They spoke Coptic, which is an entirely another thing. It's entirely in some places it's an entirely different writing style. This was developed from after I'd learned. I did this 2 years ago. This font. But I've studied Cyrillic. My family's from the Balkans, so I've studied the different Slavic languages and the different interpretations between the regions, the Croatian, Serbian, Czech, all that. And this is just trying to be like the clown language. These are little. Most of these you can make faces out of, and that's really how you. It's equal parts a cryptogram as it is a completely separate alphabet and language. If I wish I'd brought the big old translation sheet, because it also has the pronunciations of the different letters and which letters combine to make different forms. But that's really what it is when you're writing this out. This is a very early form where I really wasn't too invested in it. I was just trying to I wanted to make this look more like words than normal. But normally you're trying to make faces.
Oh, okay.
All the letters are these little swirly. You can see like that one down there looks like 2 eyes and a nose. And so that's really what it is attempting to make these little face. Pareidolia. There it is. Pareidolia was the main concept behind the development of the language, was the human ability to see faces and absolutely nothing. Make it a whole script.
Oh, fantastic. Can you read any of it? Without the translation?
This was written in. I can't read it without the translation. I'm not that good at learning new languages. I know like 50% German.
Oh, really?
I would say. So I'm like, I can't read it, but this just says, I don't desire the riches you promise with your fingers tight round your back. I just want to live without the illusion that you can escape from the trench. This sort of like always being presented with these noble billionaires and millionaires and everything, the leaders of these companies, the kings of innovation, and thinking that you're capable of doing that all through hard work. It's like, no, you have to get to a market early. You have to develop an idea. You have to monopolize the idea. And then you have to get a bunch of people underneath you. And then you have to underpay them all. So again, like I'm not trying to be rich. I'm trying to live with. I'm just trying to live. I'm trying to exist. I'm trying to create, and I'm trying to do all of it without some sort of haze over my eyes from the crowd shouting at me that I don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't work hard enough.
How do you build true innovation in a capitalistic society without the core portion of capitalism in it? If you're attempting to sway from that.
I've always I've most of it's looking at the history of the United States itself, and you can interpret how to keep that innovation going and the right way to structure capitalism. There's nothing. I'm going to scratch that right now. There's quite a bit wrong with the United States, but there's the way it just needs to be. The economy needs to be reformatted. The capitalism. There's nothing wrong with capitalism. There's something wrong with the people telling you how it goes, how it's run. Back in the 50s and 60s, I don't want to. But they worked hard to get these houses, but then everybody's dad had a motorcycle. Everybody's dad had like a muscle car that they were looking at. And no, not everybody's. There's obviously always been a poverty issue. But the fact remains that today, the majority of the population, while we are making more money, we do not have access to as many frivolous things as they did in the 50s and 60s. They may have been making like $4 or less an hour, but they were going on 3 or 4 vacations a year. If they were a low-income family, they went on at least one. I haven't been on a vacation in 6 years. Okay, it's just stuff. I'm not trying to push capitalism out of the way. I'm not an anti-capitalist, but it all boils down to that. Everybody has something right to say. What are they saying? Stop stomping out all of the voices all at once. Capitalism works in hand. Don't want to be that guy with socialism. And that was no more prevalent than it was during World War II. Mm. Every policy the U.S. had in place during World War II was a socialist policy. Everyone was growing gardens at home, ration stamps,
Women were entering the workforce.
It's what the current generation in power grew up with, and I can only assume they just took it for granted because those things. We have women in the workforce, but they're always being mistreated and they're always being forced out and told out. And we had like maybe 6 billionaires in the 60s. There's now 300 that we know of. And the poverty, the wealth gap between them, like Sorry, there weren't billionaires in the 60s. There were 100 millionaires and such not. But they didn't have this exuberant amount of wealth that was outside the limits of the wealth distribution sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let's go back.
I would say that late stage capitalism and devotion to the brands that are idolized within capitalism is what really hinders innovation. When a couple mom and pop brand of sodas are going out of business, but Mountain Dew just put out Flamin' Hot.
Yeah.
Mountain Dew. Again, nothing stamps out innovation more than overreaching capitalism, because overreaching, here's going to be a problematic quote. Late stage capitalism is no different than USSR communism.
Yeah.
At some point, the government is slowly falling in the hands of the people with all the money. When it falls into the hands of the people with all the money, they ask for all the money. That's all I have left to say.
And then with the checkpoints that are being made, do you know what happens in the end? How does the universe get saved? Can we save it?
I'm not entirely sure. Again, I would still consider myself very much in the early era of the Roboy story. But I haven't considered a saving the world scenario. I haven't considered an end of the world scenario too. Like it's supposed to be the world's ending every single second sort of thing, and that's what Roboy is preventing. And I would say the world has in trying to combine the world of Roboy with the real world, the world has a better chance of being saved if we maintain the checkpoints. If instead of pushing past it, attempting to industrialize continuously, which is what part of the problem is in Roboy, those checkpoints, the sort of over-industrialization, the pushing these things out because human ego. We just need to invest in and find the ability to maintain what we do have.
Up to date, what's been Roboy's biggest accomplishment and what's been his biggest failure?
I'm not sure really what Roboy's biggest accomplishment is. I would say that he has not yet achieved his biggest accomplishment. I know that it's at this point, what is his biggest accomplishment? But within my story, he's on a series of campaigns right now. And so just being able to contain and push past these butterfly effects and maintain these checkpoints, I would say is his biggest accomplishment. His biggest failure, it only exists as an, sorry. This is not the illustration I was going to talk about. This is the second one because I realize it doesn't just exist as the one illustration. But I do have one of him trekking through the desert on his way to a building that houses this complex. And the historian, me, before he becomes Eli, in an effort to continue to maintain, to find an answer to saving the world, takes his brain and sticks it in two jars. Two jars. There's only one here, but two jars. There's one here for a reason. His left half and his right half, two separate jars. And at some point, the right one is stolen. The right half gets dropped into the fountain of youth, or the font of immortals, and it becomes Eli. And that's how Eli's born. It's the right hemisphere of my brain, the creative side of my brain, falling into the font of immortals. The left side sent out a distress signal, and Roboy came to attempt to find the left side to see what was wrong. And when he arrived, he got in an argument with the left hemisphere of the brain. And the left hemisphere decided that the best cure for all of Earth's problems, because Roboy's journey to the checkpoints to attempt to push back the butterfly effects was deemed tedious and ineffective, the left brain built a machine to send out a sound wave to evaporate all water-based organisms in the solar system and succeeded. Because Roboy ended up falling to the Red Lady, who is a projection created by the left brain to defend him and to create more robots, not roboys, just robots, for the left brain's army after he had wiped out. Sort of an Ultron situation, but not necessarily Ultron. I feel a little bit more complicated than Ultron.
Yeah.
But that would be Roboy's biggest failure is wiping out most of humanity by proxy, because it's the one time he's actually failed and been sent back. And that in the story is known as the Great Hush, and it's actually where what I consider the starting point of Roboy, because the Great Hush happens at the same time Eli is made, and then Eli, it's one of those sort of like looping situations where like, Roboy went here to capture the right brain before it became Eli, but if Roboy hadn't died here, failed, and the left brain won, Eli wouldn't have been made, and he wouldn't have made Roboy in the first place, and this might have been worse.
Oh, wow.
So
I think it's interesting how you said the process of over-industrialization. So what we start with innovation or imagination or scientific building made E equals MC squared. We over-industrialize that. Now we have nuclear warheads.
Yes. We make a cayenne flavored potato chips, flaming hot Mountain Dew. Again, it's just over-industrialization. Sorry, what was the question?
Oh, no, I was just saying, I think that's a really interesting how you said that the over-industrialization kind of could lead to our fate being negative.
Over-industrialization is just a bad thing in general, but it's also, it's one path that humanity has picked for itself. And we don't have to continue industrializing everything. The Industrial Revolution has to end at some point. And bad ideas fail all of the time, whether they're a couple minutes old, whether they're 200 years old. The first step to curing addiction is realizing that there's a problem and realizing you're going to be just as miserable without it as you are with it currently. And the same goes for eras of human history.
Yeah.
You know, the Roman Empire turned into this greedy wall of congressmen and billionaires, and when they tried to hide from the village people burned it down. Not to say we need to burn it down, but we need to be accepting of when the path we've picked probably isn't the right path, and be willing to change direction. And not be unwilling to change direction just because of how comfortable we are. Because we're not comfortable anymore. Most of us are lying to ourselves.
That's amazing. And I think that gives everybody a good concept to consider and think of. And I think it really brings together.
I just want to sit on the porch.
Just want to sit on the porch. On that note, we'll say thank you for listening to 1,000 Words. I'd like to thank our guest, Gage Craft, for his time, effort, and insight. This episode was recorded at Wolf Den Studios in South Bend. Our audio engineer is Dustin Taberski. We hope you enjoyed this journey of inspiration, definitely a lot of imagination and exploration. I'm Ronnie Doss, reminding you to have fun, be creative, and enjoy a wonderful day.